Today I attempt to paint the Farstriders from Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire, right after this. Hey everyone, Sam here from the Tabletop Hub, and today I'm back with another painting tutorial where I try my hand at painting the Farstriders from Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire. Now, for those of you who are new to the series, I am not a professional painter whatsoever, but I am on a journey and I'm getting better and always learning new things. And my hope is that through these painting tutorials, you'll also pick up a few new ideas and equally be inspired to pick up a paintbrush and go paint some minis. So, if that sounds like your cup of tea, hit the subscribe button down below to find out when new videos go live. So first off, I gave all three miniatures a zenithal undercoat just so I could pick out the highlights and shadows more easily when painting the miniature. We're going to be focusing on the paint job of one specific Farstrider miniature in this video, but I'll touch upon the different finishing touches I added to all three at the end. To begin, I used some of Army Painter's gunmetal and applied this to all of the shadowed areas of the miniature's armour. Once this was done, I took Army Painter's plate mail metal and applied this to the highlighted and mid-tone areas of the armour. Now don't worry if some areas need more than one coating. We aren't in any rush whatsoever here, and it's better to add a few thin coats than layer on a couple of thick coatings and cover up some of the more intricate details of the miniature. At the areas where the shadowed layer and the highlighted area met, I just dry brushed or blended the two layers together as best as I could. For this, I find that just having little to no more paint left on your brush is best. Personally, I didn't want to wet the brush to do this, just because I felt like it might be a bit too much, but just a simple dry brush did the trick. Next, I got some Army Painter Oak Brown and added some matte black to the paint to give it a really thick, dark look. As you'll see, I had painted on some leather brown previously, or some Munster brown even, but it just wasn't dark enough, and I wanted my paint scheme for the Farstriders to be more of an edged and rugged medieval look with hints of regality. This darker tone really worked well when offset by the gold and metal that we'll see later on. I used this same brown paint mixture to paint onto the shadowed areas of the Farstrider's cloak, both on the fur at the back and the lining on the inside. For the highlighted areas of the fur and cloak, I instead took some Army Painter leather brown and added just a dash of matte black to that for the same effect, just to bring down the lightness of the brown by a shade or two. Again, much with the armour, I dry brushed the two layers of brown together to make them almost fade between one another, and I think it gave it a really nice look with a very simple technique whenever it had dried. Next, I took some Army Painter Greedy Gold and painted the decorative parts of the armour. Now, I actually applied a little more gold to this first miniature, which I think in the end was too much. For the other two Farstriders, I actually stripped it back a little bit, which you'll see near the end. And I think when it comes to the gold, less is definitely more on these miniatures. But the main chest piece, the little lightning bolts on the knees, cloak lining and shoulder, as well as some of the features on the helmet and belt buckle, all look really great when painted with this Greedy Gold. For the plume of the helmet, I took some Army Painter Deep Blue and accented this on the highlighted areas with Army Painter's Crystal Blue. Again, you may find, especially with the highlights, that they need a couple of coatings, but don't worry, just leave it to dry, come back again later for another coat until you get an even finish. I actually used these two colours to paint the sword and melee weapons of the Farstriders unit as well, using the same technique of deep blue on the shadowed or darker areas, crystal blue on the highlights as well. For this soldier, I used Greedy Gold and Oak Brown for the crossbow. However, I switched this up and used Gunmetal and Oak Brown for the other Farstriders, which in the end I actually preferred. Again, it was all about balancing out the amount of gold used for me in the end, and I felt like using Gunmetal here instead of Greedy Gold just complemented the warriors better. Then we were on to the base. For the broken tree stumps, I used the same technique and mixture we used for the Farstrider's cloak, oak brown and matte black for the shadows, leather brown and matte black for the highlights, and went over the stump and the roots with these two paints, making sure to blend them together where possible. This just gave a really nice effect when it's dried, and the way the colours faded into each other, for me, I just thought was really nice. For the slabs, I used Army Painter's Dungeon Grey for the slabs in shadow, and Ash Grey for the slabs in the highlighted areas. Now, if you use the same paints, the Ash Grey may look quite bright, but once we add an ink at the end, remember that that'll bring it down a tone or two. This is always something to remember when you're painting, especially if you are using Army Painter's Quick Shade at the end, or a dark ink, whether that be from Citadel or somebody else. Although it may look a little bright now, what you add later will bring it down a shade or two, so you've always got to be thinking ahead to the final product whenever you're adding these layers. For the dirt, I gave it a base coat of leather brown just to fill in the colour, and then to add some texture to the bases, I wanted to experiment a little, so I got some of Vallejo's Mud in a Tub, as I like to call it, and added brown earth texture to these dirt areas. Now, one thing I will say is that this dries pretty quickly, so if you make any mistakes, you've got to act really fast to get them wiped away. As you can see, I used quite a wide dry brush to apply this, so make sure to give your brushes a good clean afterwards, as you will have little bits of grit in it. I would equally recommend you change your water as well after cleaning your mud brush, as you don't want that grit getting into your brushes and affecting the rest of your painting. Once this was all done though, I ran my thumb around the base edge and just rubbed or picked off any excess mud. Once this was complete, I took some of Citadel's Nuln Oil and applied this ink generously to the entire miniature, including the base. Now this just seeped into all of the little cracks in the miniature and really added a nice punch to the overall look of the Farstriders that I was really impressed with, and really helped give the armour especially that almost aged and weathered look that I was really going for. With regards to the other warriors, just as finishing touches, for the Farstriders champion, I used Army Painter's Electric Blue to colour in his little orb attached to his waist. For the eagle, or hawk, I think it's an eagle, he has on his shoulder, I painted the shadows of the eagle oak brown, the highlights leather brown, and the breast bone white from Vallejo. I wasn't overly pleased with my paintwork for the eagle, if I'm honest with you, but it was the first time I'd ever painted an animal like this, so I had to cut myself a little bit of slack. I think in the end it looks fine, but it's definitely a learning experience. But folks, that is it. That was my paint choices and techniques for painting the Farstriders from Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire. What do you think? Equally, if any of you have some unique paint styles for your Shadespire warbands, I would love to see them, so why not join my Discord in the video description and post your warbands for me in the Tabletop Hub chat. If you have enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe. I'll be bringing you another warband in the coming months. I think I'm probably going to do the Sepulchral Guard next. But until next time, have a great week, and I will of course speak to you all soon.